Want to live longer and better? I'm Dr. Jess. I'm a physical therapist, and in this podcast, I bring you real, science-backed strategies from physical health providers, mental health providers, and nutrition experts, so you can build strength, protect your mind, and fuel your body for decades to come. Longevity starts here.
If you've ever skipped stretching because you thought it just wasn't doing anything, today you're going to start to rethink everything. Stretching doesn't just make you stronger, it actually helps you rebuild muscle architecture and can really help move you forward with the training that you're doing. So that's right, today what I'm going to be talking about is stretching and how that can actually help you in the training get more out of it so the time you're spending is that much more effective. So let's dive into why this is the case. So first, we need to kind of take a step back, just like always, and have an understanding of a bit of anatomy. And the more we understand that, then everything starts to make more sense. So when we think about a muscle is just going to be an overlapping fibers of what we call actin and myosin. And so a normal length muscle, if you're watching me, kind of shows where you've got an overlap of the muscle. And then when you contract the muscle, there's plenty of room for that muscle to contract, and it comes back to this resting length. And so when a muscle starts to get tight, then we start to see more overlap of the actin and myosin at rest. And what that means is that when you contract that muscle, you don't have as much room to get that solid contraction, and then you're not going to get as much power out of that muscle. So a tight muscle actually equals a weak muscle. And we don't want that, because if we're spending time trying to get strong and stay strong, then why would we skip stretching to maintain muscle length if tight equals weak? So now that goes into a little bit more of what we call the length-tension relationship in the muscle. And so there's going to be an amount of tension that's held in that muscle and length that's held in that muscle. And so when we have optimal, what we call length-tension relationship, then the force production that we can get out of that muscle improves. So even with no training at all, if you did no strengthening, but you just improved length and got that optimal length tension relationship, you would see improved force production. Now combine it with some training, and now you're actually going to get some really great results, which is going to be improved strength. Now, the other reason why stretching can be super important for maintaining strength and building strength is that if you have adequate length in muscles, then you'll be able to move through normal movement patterns. If you get tight in certain areas, that can start leading into what we call compensatory patterns. So let's say, for example, you're trying to strengthen muscles in the back of your shoulder blade, but your pecs are short and tight. Well, a short pec is going to roll the shoulder forward. So it's going to change the position of how that shoulder fires and functions, whether it's shoulder muscles or it could be scapular muscles, it could be your biceps, it could be even the pecs themselves that are short, and you're not going to get the power output that you're looking for. So something as simple as tight pecs can really impact the strength in your mid-back, the strength in your shoulders, and the strength in your chest. It's crazy. And tight pecs are so common because we sit and do computer work, we drive, we sit and eat dinner, and we sit on the couch and watch a show, or we sit and read, and all of this tends to go forward. And so rarely in our everyday lives do we actually open up and reach backwards to be able to stretch the muscles in the front of our chest, which are our pectorals. So it's one of those really very common areas that get tight. Another really, really common area that gets tight are your hamstrings, because when we sit, the knee is bent, and that bent knee puts the hamstring in a shortened position. And so now that short, tight hamstring has a tendency to get weak. The same thing with our hip flexors. We sit and our hip flexors are in a shortened position. And so all of this starts to contribute to why it can be harder for us to get the results that we're looking for, whether it's in the gym with strengthening, but also if you're training, if you're working on a walking program and working on walking speed or a running program, if you don't have adequate length through the muscle, it's going to affect how you move. And if you're not able to move through, for example, let's say hip extension. So if you're walking and that hip needs to extend behind you, to help drive you forward, or if you're running and that hip needs to extend to drive you forward so that you can use those big muscles, your glutes and the back of the hip, but it can't extend because the hip flexor is tight, then you're going to compensate. And you're going to compensate with muscles that are not nearly as effective to be able to propel you in space. And so you're not going to see your times change. You're going to be essentially like spending training time without the benefit. So we want to use the muscle that we have, and we want that force output out of the muscle to be adequate. So moral of the story is maintain length or gain length in muscles that are, the muscles throughout the body that have a tendency to get tight. And so typically, if you're only going to stretch a few muscles because you're like, listen, I have 10 minutes, that's it, that's all I can give to stretching. That's fine, right? 10 minutes is more than no minutes, then I'll take it. And so stretching the pecs, that's an easy one to do in a doorway where you kind of anchor your elbow and your hand in the doorway, keep your weight on your feet, step forward until you feel a stretch in the front of your shoulder, no pinching in the shoulder, no pain, just anytime you stretch, you need to know what muscle am I stretching and where do I feel the stretch. If I don't feel it in the area that I'm intending to feel it, then something is wrong every single time. It's the same thing with strengthening. If you're trying to strengthen a muscle and you don't feel that muscle doing the work, that's a compensation, and you need to change how you're doing it because you're not going to get the result that you want. So if I'm in the doorway and I'm trying to stretch my pec, but I'm feeling pain in my shoulder, that means you're impinging. So drop your elbow and then try again and see. The other thing you might be doing is you might be pushing your arm into the door frame instead of letting that muscle lengthen. So this is when I see all the time where I set up a patient in a doorway stretch and they're pushing their arm into that doorway. Are you trying to push the wall over, or are we trying to lengthen the muscle? And they're like, I think I'm trying to push the wall over. I'm like, right. So don't push it over. We're just using the doorway as an anchor point. So when we stretch a muscle, we're just going to pull two bones away. The muscle attaches on one side and then attaches on the other side. And we're just going to pull the attachments away. And then in between, we get a stretch. That's all it is. It's really not complicated. It's just about setting it up correctly. So you can do a pec stretch in a doorway. You can also do a pec stretch if you're on a foam roller, like a 3-foot long foam roller, and you lie on your back, knees bent, arms come out to the side. That's also a really nice way to stretch your pecs. This is my favorite. I love doing this at the end of every night because after a long day of like up and doing all the stuff forward, just being able to open up, breathe, and stretch on a foam roller is just glorious. And then add a little bit of meditation to that. And it's like, come on, you've got mental health plus stretching. What's not to love? It's a great way to end your day. Another common muscle, I've already kind of referenced it, is your hip flexor. So the hip flexor is the muscle in the front of the hip. A standing lunge stretch would be a great way to be able to stretch that hip flexor, or a half kneel stretch. It doesn't matter, whichever one you can get into safely and comfortably. But in a standing lunge, one foot's going to be forward and the other foot's going to go back. And then you want to feel a stretch in the front of the hip. That's where your hip flexor is. If you don't feel a stretch in the front of the hip, squeeze your glute muscle. If you squeeze that glute, it'll push that hip forward. And then sometimes now you can start to feel it in the front of the hip. Sometimes this is a hard one to feel, but going into a half kneel position would be the same knee. So same thing where you've got, this one knee is down, one foot is up. So like a half kneel, and then lunge forward to feel the stretch in the front of the hip. And anytime we stretch, you want to hold it ideally for about a minute and then be able to maybe do it twice. If we're actually really trying to build length versus maintain length, then you can hold it for about 30 seconds. But if you're super tight, you're probably going to have to hold it for more than 30 seconds. A good minute, if not 2, and that'll actually help you to build some length. Hamstring stretching, another common one. Tight hamstrings will cause back pain, and they will really affect your gait pattern. They'll affect how you bend. It's a big one. These ones can be a real culprit to some issues, and then you don't have the strength in the hamstring, which is like a huge muscle that propels you, and that muscle in the back of the leg is important. So you can do this in a seated position where you put one leg straight out in front of you, and then like you're sitting on a bed, one leg straight out in front of you, and you just kind of hinge forward until you feel a stretch on the back of your thigh, and a comfortable stretch. Anytime you stretch, it should be, let's say, like a moderate intensity pull. It's not painful, nothing burns, nothing hurts. It's just a pull. That's all it is. And then you just hold it. you maintain that position, breathe, do whatever it is that you want to do, and then move on. The other one, the last one that's kind of pretty key, that can also affect gait speed, which is walking speed or running speed, is the calf muscles in the back of your calf. These muscles in the back of the calf, they limit your ankle range of motion. They can big time limit the depth of your squat. This one is like one of the classics. If I've got somebody that's like frustrated, they're in the gym and they're having a hard time getting that squat and progress that squat. Let's say we've kind of worked them through back pain, we've worked them through a whole bunch of things, and now they're kind of back into that, getting back into training mode. It's like, okay, let's check and see how your depth is looking in your squat. And, sure enough, we still have some limited ankle range of motion. Stretch the calf really well, and that will big time help you get deeper into your squat, because now as you bend in that squat, that ankle can move, and now you can really load the rest of the leg how you want to load it. But I'm telling you, a tight calf all day will limit your squat, and it'll limit your gait speed. So that running speed that you're looking for, a race that you're training for, a tight calf all day will get in your way. And it doesn't need to. This is a super easy fix. So same thing, you would do a lunge stretch for that. Keep the heel on the ground, take a big step back, and then feel the stretch in the back of the calf. There's two muscles back there. Bend the knee, and then you'll feel the stretch a little bit lower down, more towards the heel bone. That's your soleus. So there's the gastroc and the soleus. Both of those muscles combine to make what we call the Achilles tendon. And so we want to stretch both of those. So anytime we stretch the calf, we're going to do a knee straight stretch for the calf, and then we're going to bend that knee, and then we're going to do another stretch for the soleus. So that way you ensure that you maintain that ankle mobility. The soleus is one that a lot of people miss on their stretching, and I'll still see that limited ankle range of motion, even though they're stretching their calves. So knee bent, knee straight. The other thing to just consider with why does stretching help build muscle is because you'll be able to use the right muscle when you're strengthening, because you won't be compensating, because you have the correct range of motion that you need to do the proper motion. And so it's, for a reminder, it's muscle length tension relationship. So when we have adequate length in the muscle, then boom, when you contract that muscle, you're going to get proper force output. And then also you be able to contract the correct muscle, because you'll be able to access the correct muscle. Let's say I'm doing like some sort of a pull down. If my pec allows me to retract my scapula or pull them together, then I can really use those muscles in my mid back. But if my pec is short and tight, then I'm going to start compensating, and I'll start using the muscles in my traps, and then I can get a headache afterwards. And that doesn't really make any sense if I'm trying to strengthen my mid back. The other thing that we always want to consider as well is if I'm doing a strengthening exercise and if I have full available range of motion, I'll actually strengthen through more of the muscle. So that full length of the strengthening is actually really important as well, because you're going to get more out of your training than if you just use a mid-range strengthening. So for example, in that squat, we want to be able to go deep into the squat and then push all the way up through that, not just a little mid-range squat. Because if you're going to spend the time doing it, you want the most out of it. So being able to control the full range is really key. And there's a significant amount more gain from the exercise just by being able to move through the full range of motion. So the takeaways are: make sure that you stretch. The key muscles to stretch are the pecs, the hamstrings, the calf, and the hip flexor. There's tons of other stretching and mobility you can do, but those are the four that, just from years of seeing people injured and having struggles, these are probably the four muscles that I see tight on so many people, and it creates limitations, and it impairs their ability to function and get the most out of what they're doing and how they're trying to stay healthy. And so that's longevity. The healthier you are, the less injury you have, the more that you can participate in your cardio program and your strengthening program and see results. You stay motivated because you see results. And it can be something that you just add this 10 minutes of stretching, ideally 4 to 5 days a week, and it can really change your outlook and how you feel. Now, When do you stretch? That's another thing of like, when's the best time to do stretching? Typically before you work out or run or walk or bike or whatever your kind of exercise you're doing, you want to do a warm up. So that's different than a static hold stretch where I was talking about that holding it 30 seconds to a minute, if not a little bit longer. A warm up is going to be where you do kind of like shorter movement patterns. You're not really trying to hit full end ranges. So like I like doing like some heel sweeps and kind of, how kind of runners will kind of like kick that one leg back and forth, kind of get some nice, easy stretching. You might kind of open up and do some rotational stretching. It kind of depends on what you're going to do. If you're going to do some overhead work, you might work your shoulders through some full range of motion. And just kind of warm everything up. So you want to get through the range of motion, but you don't need to hold it for long periods of time because we don't have a lot of blood that's pumped into the muscle. So it's more about kind of getting some active movement. To do static stretching, that's typically what you're going to do after you work out, after you walk, after you run, after you're in the gym, while everything's nice and warm, because now you're going to really be able to get into those deep holds and maintain that for a long duration, like a full minute, and you'll get more out of it. You'll feel like you can get further because you're warmed up. So again, it's just going to be more effective for the results that you want to gain that range by doing it while you're warm. So I do it at the end of like essentially anytime I run, I come in, I cool down, and I do my stretching routine. It takes 10-15 minutes. And I kind of hit all my major targets and then I move on. I'm done. And I just stack it into my normal routine. It's not anything that I have to think about. I've just made it normal in the beginning. You kind of have to remember, oh yeah, I need to add that on. But it's probably going to take realistically about 10 minutes if you're going to actually like add some really solid stretching. But that I'm telling you, 10 minutes is well worth it for return on the investment. For every minute spent, what's my return? So this one's going to give you a nice big return on that minute spent. And that's kind of how I think of all of my decisions on how do I spend my time. That minute, I need to get something out of it. So if this is something that you find helpful, share it with a friend. That's kind of how we kind of spread the information to, just keep this longevity topic going, and the simple, more or less free things that we can do that can really make an impact to how we feel on a day-to-day basis. So give it a like. If you have any questions or comments, obviously leave that below. If there's anything that you're like, hey, like I'd really like to learn more about X, Y, or Z, go ahead and put that in the comments. Like I'll do my best to accommodate that with an episode and throughout, some information, research, whatever it might be. So, all right, everybody, stay tuned for next week.